Hi there, welcome to Afro Perspectives. I am here to talk about the M23, specifically the Congolese Armed Forces known as FARDC, using its acronym in the French language. And I'm focusing on its failure to defeat the M23. The Congolese Armed Forces FARDC is made up of 135,000 soldiers as of 2025. On the other hand, the M23 numbers no more than 4,000 fighters. With its allies, the River Congo Alliance, and its state backer, the Rwanda Defense Forces, you are talking of an additional 3,000 fighters. However, in recent weeks, when the M23 has encountered setbacks, Rwanda has sent its own soldiers stationed across the border town of Gisenyi, and they have simply walked across the undefended frontier to reinforce the M23. In early January, the M23 and its allies, the RDF, defeated the much larger FARDC. In the process, it captured the cities of Goma and Bukavu in the east of the country. Goma is a city of close to 2 million people. It's of strategic importance, and it's effectively the biggest urban agglomeration in the Great Lakes region. Whoever is in charge of Goma effectively controls the flow of strategic minerals to the rest of the world, minerals such as cassiterite, coltan, and even gold. Even if one were an eternal optimist, there is not much hope for the Congo. The DRC, with its vast geographical expanse, is cursed with an extremely weak government led by President Felix Tshisekedi. That government is also of questionable legitimacy, given that Tshisekedi came to power in 2019 after a fraudulent process and then stayed in power after flawed elections in 2023. To get an idea of why the DRC government fails to defeat the M23, please stay with us right to the end. Here, I'm going to talk of lack of training, equipment, and lack of communication. The FARDC is highly outdated and inefficient in terms of technology and logistics. Like I've said before, the vast expanse of the DRC in terms of its geographical space is a challenge in its own right. The command element of the military is stationed in Kinshasa, 2,000 kilometers to the west as the crow flies. Kinshasa sometimes doesn't know where parts of the army are traveling in eastern Congo. The army is sometimes coordinated via WhatsApp, which makes it extremely difficult for Kinshasa to give clear instructions that are then implemented on the ground. Then there is the issue of chronism and the fear of a coup d'etat. Since the time of a long-time dictator Mobutu Sese Seko, the Congolese military has been deliberately sabotaged the efforts to create a professional, competent military. Successive governments have sought a military whose loyalty can be counted on in times of crisis within the borders of the DRC itself. For President Mobutu, the command element of his military were Ngwanda tribesmen from his home province, while both Kabila the father and Kabila the son, the top brass of the military, was Katangese. The tribalist tradition in ensuring loyalty did not end with the rule of Joseph Kabila. Since taking over in 2019, President Tshisekedi has purged the military of top officers whose loyalty he could not count on, and he has replaced them with his fellow Luba tribesmen. The DRC military has, over the past 30 years, absorbed a succession of warlords and rebel fighters. For instance, in the current conflict, generals who are in command posts in the eastern DRC in the two Kivu provinces are on first-name terms with the command element of the M23. In its advance on Goma, the M23 did not even engage in any fighting at all, as they have friends within the DRC military leaked battle plans and ensured that little fighting took place. By deploying the bulk of the army in the east, the president is keeps officers' salaries very low by granting them high allowances and discretionary bonuses and then giving them carte blanche for racketeering. The political elite have protected themselves against potential coups and enriched themselves through embezzlement schemes. For instance, over 90% of officers' remuneration depends on legal or extra-legal payments directly linked to military operations. For example, officers in command positions often receive a command bonus worth up to $1,000 a month, and intelligence officers sometimes receive a secret intelligence fund worth several hundreds of thousands of dollars a month, but only if they were conducting military operations. These payments are not statutory and were made at the discretion of military officers, reinforcing individual loyalty to them. Then there is the question of divisions within the military itself. Since the days of President Mobutu Sese Seko, successive DRC governments have made sure that the army is weak and to some extent underpaid. Mobutu especially did not want the army to become too strong for fear of a coup d'etat and played generals off against each other. And that tradition has continued with successive Congolese governments. In any other ordinary country, the principal role of the military is securing the national borders and ensuring the territorial integrity of the country. However, successive Congolese governments have prioritized the Presidential Guard. President Tshisekedi's Presidential Guard, named the Republican Guard, is an elite force with excellent working conditions and is provided with state-of-the-art equipment. Even if President Tshisekedi could implement reforms, there is no guarantee he is going to get the cooperation of the command element of the military, who for the past 30 or so years, Rwanda has infiltrated, and it has used its own citizens to infiltrate into the DRC's military structures. The result is that on the front line, soldiers are often left on their own with the top commanders deserting their posts. During the recent fall of Goma, the FARDC resisted for close to 48 hours, with the highest officers leading ordinary soldiers on the ground as a captain, while the generals fled via Lake Kivu to the safety of South Kivu. Recent reverses successively suffered in North Kivu by the FARDC against the M23 since June 22 mainly attribute to the ineffectiveness of the FARDC to their disorganized, dysfunctional, and incompetent command. On the operational level, there is an overlapping of structures in the chain of command and the absence of, say, a single command. There is also an overlapping of skills between the different levels of command. It is not really known who commands military operations between the different levels of command. Before the fall of Goma, there were 24 generals stationed in Goma. Amid these, there was the military governor of North Kivu, the commander of the defense zone, the commander of the 3rd Defense Zone, the commander of the 34th Military Region, which encompasses North Kivu, then the commanders of the operational sectors, the commander of the Republican Guard Task Force, the commander of the 3rd Air Group. All these, they were all stationed in Goma. Although the military governor of North Kivu, Peter Chirimwami, the late Peter Chirimwami, was supposed to exercise territorial administrative authority, he had no overall command of the various units deployed in the province itself. When he tried to show up on the battlefield, he was accused of colluding with the enemy and was killed in a friendly fire incident, effectively executed by one of his own soldiers. Then there is the role of the commanding the various units and formations deployed in North Kivu, which fell on the shoulders of the commander of the 34th Military Region, which covers North Kivu. However, on the ground, he was a marginalized figure with little operational grasp of the day-to-day military operations. Under Congolese military law, the head of the 34th Military Region as a role, and it has been defined as, say, in the event of an alert or armed threat, he has to ensure the preparedness and operational deployment of the military units assigned to the geographic area under his jurisdiction, that is North Kivu. Just as an illustration, consider the fall of Goma 12 years ago. In 2013, after the fall of Goma, when the late Major General Lucien Bahuma, then commander of what was known as the 8th Military Region covering North Kivu at the time, he was appointed commander of all the operations carried out in this province. This in part clarified his role and led to the defeat of the M23. On top of these problems, the army doesn't have a proper control over its personnel, and it lacks the basic documents needed to track its structure and equipment. This makes it hard to get a clear picture of the army and what it has. When it comes to combat, the units perform poorly. They struggle with both movement and logistics. They are also unable to plan or carry out coordinated operations that involve different types of forces like infantry, armored units, special forces, and air support. Then there is the presence of certain military units independent of the local operational command and the military region. These are the generals who are close to President Tshisekedi himself, the blue-eyed boys. They force their decisions on other generals and create an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. This makes other officers who might have good ideas afraid to speak up or take action. As a result, some commanders hold back from making decisions because they are worried that these presidential generals will wrongly accuse them of something. Take, for instance, Major General Frank Bwamana Ntumba, head of the president's military household, and then there is Deputy Chief of the General Staff in charge of operations, Major General Chiko Chitambwe. These two were, because of their proximity to the center of power in Kinshasa, were accused by other generals stationed in the North Kivu of making unilateral and cavalier initiatives without consulting with the other levels of local command in North Kivu. As is the aforementioned problem were not enough, many soldiers have deserted their units, which were already short on personnel because the generals exaggerated the number of troops to steal money through fake bonuses, fuel allowances, and equipment claims. Military leaders at all levels are using extra operational funds to line their own pockets. And perhaps the most single important factor was the lack of motivation. Soldiers on the front lines lack motivation and were poorly supported, especially if they are injured or killed. There is no resupply in even such basics as rations, uniform, and ammunition. The situation was so desperate to the extent that villagers had to step in and feed starving soldiers. Soldiers' families are left to fend for themselves with no information on the welfare of serving soldiers or those deployed at the front line. Wounded soldiers are left to their own devices with no proper medical care, while fallen comrades are treated, often buried without respect. This has led the soldiers on the front to hold back and just give up in the face of the enemy's advances. Then there is the factor which I've called the Rwanda factor. It is an open secret that the Rwandan military, the Rwanda Defense Force, the RDF, supports the M23. Although Rwanda, when confronted with its involvement in Congo, always insisted that the M23 is entirely Congolese. However, there is conclusive evidence that the RDF supplies the M23 with weapons, ammunition, and reinforcements. In the run-up to the siege of Goma, the DRC Foreign Minister Therese Kaikwamba Wagner reported that additional Rwandan troops had crossed the border. After the fall of Goma, Rwanda had sent up to 5,000 Rwandan soldiers into North Kivu, and this by some accounts is only a conservative estimate. While Sultani Makenga leads M23's operations, it's highly unlikely the group, that is M23, could achieve such major strategic gains without support from Rwanda. Some believe that General James Kabarebe is the key strategist behind M23's success. Be that as it may, the nature of Rwanda's alleged support is multifaceted and includes military assistance, personnel support, logistical aid, and political backing. Several potential motivations for this support have been suggested, including security concerns related to the presence of Hutu militia groups in eastern DRC, economic interest in the region's mineral wealth, a desire to maintain regional influence, and the stated goal of protecting Tutsi communities. Whether Rwanda's reported backing of the M23 amounts to state-sponsored terrorism depends on how terrorism is defined in this situation. Although there is substantial evidence pointing to Rwandan involvement, calling it state-sponsored terrorism is still debated. It may be more accurate to refer to it as proxy warfare or as a state supporting an armed group that isn't officially part of any government. A major development in the conflict occurred on July 30, 2024, when Angola, serving as a mediator, announced a ceasefire deal between the DRC and Rwanda. By brokering the agreement directly between the two countries instead of involving the M23 rebel group, Angola indirectly confirmed Rwanda's connection to M23. This diplomatic move strongly suggests that Rwanda is backing the group, even though it officially denies any involvement. Rwanda has been backing the M23 rebels, giving them weapons, drones, and ammunition. Between 3,000 and 4,000 Rwandan troops are on Congolese soils, according to UN reporting. Thank you for listening, and if there is anything I have missed or got wrong, please let me know in the comments box below. Thank you. Bye.